Everybody, how are you doing tonight? Hopefully you're having a good time. We've got some fun things to talk about tonight. Kurt, Kurt texted me earlier today, said like happy Bowmore and Springbank 30 day, which is kind of true. I mean, looking forward to both of these. I'll admit something here though. I'm spoiled. Sean and I got to try the Springbank 30 in Scotland in the fall. Um, Plus we got to try some more than 30-year-old Springbank right out of a cask, which was insane. Um, those are like, I think those are some of the oldest Springbanks I've had since back in the day. We had that 1969 signatory Springbank, Kurt, the 40-year-old, which is probably the oldest Springbank I've ever had or will ever have age-wise. I mean, maybe in 20 years there'll be something older than that, or 15 years, but who knows. Yeah, this is a fun lineup. And Kurt, I don't know if you're talking, but your voice is not coming through.
No, I was about to, but I was listening to the rolling lilt of your voice, and I got
You were lost for words.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about starting a lineup with cognac. It's been one of those categories I've put more and more of my time and effort into lately. It's exciting, and I think it's a category where we can actually stretch your dollar a little bit, and we've got two color ones to start, so it's a cool way to start a whiskey tasting in its own way.
We really do. And that does open up the opportunity for a segue into other things that are coming up, because we do have some other events coming down the pipeline. And I'm actually just trying to check something here. I'm multitasking, which everyone knows I don't do extraordinarily well, but I'm trying. We do have some other tastings coming up that I just want to quickly highlight. If you're in Calgary and want to take part in Thursday's in-person 8 p.m. SMWS tasting, you can, because there's spots, and you're going to be the second group of people. The 6 p.m. people will beat you by about 2 hours in the tasting room since the renos, and we don't have carpet in there anymore. So the room will not permanently smell like cheese that's been ground into the carpet by circumstance, I guess. So it'll be cleaner. It's going to be bigger too. We've made the room a little more spacious, so you're going to want to check it out. That's coming up. I'm just going to scroll through some things here because there's a bunch of stuff that's sold out, but there's one spot left for Evans Bourbon or Bust tasting in store. Shouldn't say just Evans, it might be Harmonies too. I honestly don't know. Irish whiskey Boomer Bust or Boomer Bubble is coming up in the very near future. St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. Pretty sure this is Harmony's joint this time around, or Harmony and I don't know, one of them, but I'm pretty sure Harmony. Agave Spirits, which is virtual. There's some cool tequila and mezcal on that's coming up. We have a wine festival, which is fun. Bunch of other stuff, more bourbon, because that's what Evan and Harmony do. This could have been Harmony. I think we've overused Evan's image on this. We could probably all agree, but I'm most excited about this, our Fescio, which we actually do have a bit more space than 5 spots left, but it is selling. And then there's Glengoyne, and the segue bit that I mentioned was to get to this because Kurt was talking cognac. This is kind of a fun tasting that we've got coming up. It has a crazy 414 years of spirits in the lineup. Admittedly, they're all grape spirits, but they're hella old. Most of them have got like insanely good reviews on them. So something to definitely check out. We know it's not inexpensive tasting, but if you like old oak matured stuff, you'll probably like that too. So check it out, the Rare and Old Spirits, which is a riff on some of the tastings that we were doing before. But I'll just fire that link in the chat there. Kurt's put the order in, and I'm just going to go through it quickly. As you mentioned, we're starting with cognac. So we're going to do the Chateau Montifuad 92 to start. Then the Valein Tercinier 30-year, the Gordon MacPhail Connoisseur's Choice Tormore, Springbank 30, Bowmore 30, Glenfarclas 92 KWM, and then we're going to wrap with the Glengoyne 30-year. And the order tonight seemed to make the most sense in terms of style, but also nose. And yeah, before we get rolling, Kurt, what have you recently learned, if anything, about cognac? Kind of putting you on the spot there.
I've learned that I have kind of developed a little bit more of a sweet tooth than I thought I did. I mean, I think it kind of piggybacks some of these flavors when you get up over a few decades again, like you and I tend to love. There's a lot of analogs between old whiskey and old cognac. And you and I had spoken about doing a tasting of old spirits, rums and cognacs and armagnacs and whiskeys, grains, everything. Once they reach a certain point, there gets to be a lot of interchangeability there and a lot of guesswork, I think, for a lot of people. I'm going to point this out because one of the special bottles in that tasting that's coming up that Andrew was just referring to is a 1928, right? It's nowhere else can you buy something from 1928 for under $1,000. You got to look at cognac. There is some damn cool stuff there.
It's true. Harmony, we haven't let you have a word in edgewise yet. I kind of feel
it's been good, hasn't it? Yeah.
Not letting you have a word in edgewise.
Yeah.
No, but you
enjoyable tasting this far.
Harmony had some technical difficulties that delayed her arrival, but she's here. Yeah, I've been to Cognac. I visited a few places. I'm excited about throwing these in because I mean, Kurt, Harmony, you guys see what comes in, what we have access to. 1992 vintage Scotch is kind of hard to come by these days, increasingly expensive. 1992 Cognac is still kind of a bargain by comparison, like less than half the price. So we jumped at the opportunity. We actually did a 1992 Montifuad Cognac for our 25th anniversary, and true story, it was only $5 less than the 30-year-old 1992 that you're trying tonight. So I don't even think that's keeping up with inflation. In fact, I know it's not keeping, like, if you look at it this way, it's probably 20% cheaper ish, 15 to 20% cheaper than the 25-year-old that we had, but kind of cool. And I've been to Montifuad. They're a tiny producer. They don't make a lot. The fact that they've now allowed us to bottle not one, but two 1992 casks is kind of mind-blowing. So
every milestone marked with 92 from Montifuad.
We'll see. One other cool little fact, they actually seal the bungs and the corks with wax. I think it has something to do with the exciseman and not removing stuff from the cask, and there's little tags with a signature on them. It's a cool distillery, very, very small. Just for comparison, because like Hennessy's probably one of the best known cognac brands out there. Hennessy accounts for something like 50% of all cognac, which is they're the Jim Beam of cognac, effectively, in terms of scale. They have some really beautiful old stuff, but they're massive. They're just a massive player. But cognac and Armagnac, its sister distillate, which we're not trying tonight, but which we will try in April 4th, I believe was the date of that tasting, the rare and old tasting. Sometimes producers bottle products made by other people, or they're blending distillate from other distilleries in with their own. There's some interesting stuff that happens. The rules are a little bit more loose and flexible. But yeah, it's really cool that we've had this. And then we've obviously, I mean, you look back at that lineup of cognacs and Armagnacs that we're going to do in April. I think at least a handful of those bottles are from Valein Tercinier. And our friend Igor hooked us up with a cask of Valein Tercinier as well. So we have not one, but two 30-year-old 1992 vintage cognacs in the store, which is pretty cool. So yeah, shall we get going?
That's
all right. So I'm going to share it on the screen. Now, the Chateau and Montifuad bottles we get are pretty beautiful, but they come with a major flaw, only from the standpoint of durability. But they use this like old school glass with imperfections on it. There's little bubbles in the glass, which is kind of fun and kind of pretty. But it also means that they're a bit more fragile. I know that we've had one or two of these not make it to its final destination because the glass has imperfections in it, which kind of makes perfect sense. But still, I love the label. It looks hand-drawn. I'll zoom in on that again for a second here. Bottled at, what's our strength here? 42.5%. I don't know if that's cask strength, but I don't think it's diluted either. I think this is the strength that the cask was at when they bottled it. And yeah, this is our 92. And Kurt and Harmony, what are your thoughts on this? I know we're starting off with something completely different tonight.
Let Harmony go ahead.
Yeah, I will second that the glass is extremely fragile. I picked one up off the shelf and put my thumb through the shoulder of the bottle, and I'm not strong.
That's not true, Harmony. You go to the gym.
Yeah, my legs are strong. My arms and upper body is just terribly weak. But the nose on this is beautiful. I know we've tried it a number of times around the shop. I love it's just like toasty richness that it has, and so it's kind of like burnt sugars and raisin notes, and yeah, it's really inviting. There's a little bit of citrus in there as well. I've never purchased a bottle of cognac in my life, so it's not something I'm familiar with nosing, but this is pretty nice.
Never say never, Harmony.
So far.
Kurt, your thoughts?
Yeah. So we're gonna do the two back to back here. I would say if you can just pick up the second one and nose back and forth. Don't try it yet, but just get the difference here between the two. This first one, to me, the Montifuad we've got, just seems a little bit rounder. It seems a little bit more almost like chocolatey, a little bit gloss set raisins. The palate's got a little bit of licorice mixed in with that grapey tone and stuff for me. It's almost a little atypical of most cognacs, I would say, that I've got my hands onto. The one that we're going to follow it with is a little more typical of what I look for in cognac and a little bit sharper. I kind of like the pillowy nature of this one, and I think it's a little bit more approachable of a style for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think if you compare the two side by side, it's pretty simple to understand why we started with the Montifuad. It's more delicate. It's more kind of that classic floral perfumed style of cognac. And just a second, Walter was sleeping on the couch and for some reason is barking at the home entertainment system, which isn't even on. Guys, I'll be back in a second.
Yeah, we've surprised a lot of customers with this. I had a couple of gentlemen in from BC, and I know there's at least a couple in this room from BC here. They came in looking for whiskeys, and one of the guys was looking for something to mark 26th birthday, I think. And we started talking about age, and finally he reached a point where he's like, okay, I can't afford those kind of prices for the age I'm looking for, so I guess just get quality. And I said, or you could change your mind on the spirit type you're looking for. I poured on these two, and the guy like did a complete 180, had no clue cognac could be like this, had no clue there was a category even like this. He fell in love with whiskey, and he came back to buy the cognac. It's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Starts with the Montifuad.
Yeah. James is saying he might have almost guessed it was Calvados. It has a very like fruity, delicate profile. And it is kind of grapey, appley fruit. So James, I can totally see where you're going with that. It's just a very clean, feminine sort of cognac, whereas the Tercinier is much more masculine. And I think we've had a lot more customers that are, say, whiskey drinkers get into the Tercinier just because it's so much deeper, darker, and richer, and not quite as floral and perfume. Just a couple quick notes about the Chateau Montifuad. They've been in business since 1866. It's a family-run business. Their founder, I believe, was a guy by the name of Pierre Valein. And it's a cool company. Currently, I'm just scrolling down here, but the current generation is Laurent, who was born in 1976, and he's been running the business since 2000. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe his wife actually might be, if not making some of the cognac, she's in charge of sales and distribution, one of the two. But it's a cool producer. Their stuff is incredibly good value. If you haven't seen their 50-year-old before, it's generally on the shelf for $250 for bona fide 50-year-old cognac. This is not cognac that's, there's a dash of 50 year in there and they're calling it 50. This is all liquid that's 50 years of age. Louis XIII, which is a beautiful product, comes in a hand blown crystal bottle, obviously very fancy. They guarantee their cognac is 40 to 100 years of age, but you can be assured that most of it is in that 40 to 50 year range, with some of it, less and less of it, being progressively older. With Montifuad and their 50 year, it's like everything in the bottle is at least 50 years of age, which is really, really cool. So love working with them. Their XO tends to be, one last note, just I'm talking up Montifuad right now, but if you're into cognac, their XO, which is I think just a tad over $100, if memory serves, their XO is 25 to 30-year-old cognac, whereas the minimum requirement for XO is just 10 years. So everything they do is 2 to 3 times the age of most of their competitors. They're actually don't have enough product anymore to meet demand. So they're not even looking for new markets. They're only continuing to sell to the ones they already have. And yet they're not raising their prices. If anything, you could say their prices have gone down relative to, the value of money. But really,
Do you
really,
think that's a Glenfarclas scenario though, Andrew, where at some point they're going to catch on? The cognac thing is starting to bubble a little bit. People are starting to get excited about it. At some point, are these guys going to go, we are drastically underpriced for what we are giving people, and start doing Glenfarclas creep?
that's a good question. I mean, I would say maybe, but probably not. And the reason for it is, as much as we don't want to address it, the major non-French cognac buying markets are buying brands. They're not buying liquid. They're not interested. You can show them, you can taste them. You can show them that this is better value, just as good a quality, if not better. And they still want the brand they know, because it's a status thing. It's not about what they're drinking. It is about what they're drinking, but not the right thing. So yeah. Anyway, cool cognac. Hermie, any final thoughts on that before we move on to the Tercinier?
No, I know the Tercinier and I'm loving it. So let's get into it.
Also, Boo Oilers. Boo Oilers.
It's not mine. That is not mine.
Expensive she got. Her eyes like that wide.
It's not, but he's not here and the dogs and cats are running amok, so I gotta keep the door open.
Right.
I thought about taking it down because I knew this was going to happen, and I'm sorry to everyone.
Yeah.
It's not mine.
The Flames are even playing tonight. I may need to do something.
They suck too, but yeah.
So just put a pin in that for a moment. So the next one we're going on to is Valein Tercinier cognac. What's cool with the Valein Tercinier brand is if you look at the cognacs that by and large are getting spoken about by the whiskey community, this is probably, especially among the geeks, this is probably the one that's right up there. And it was brought to our attention by our friend Igor. It was established in 1850, still in the Tercinier family. And in their words, and the current person running it is Catherine Roudier Tercinier is her last name. And I believe she's the distiller as well. And they've got some incredibly old liquid and juice. And we've had some fun. And it's also good. This is where a lot of those like really old 1940s, 1930s cognacs that we're getting have come from. Most of them have been from Tercinier. And we've not opened anywhere near enough of them, but it's a cool brand. So here's our bottle. I'm going to share my screen. Some of you may have already seen this or may already own one. I don't think we've put this into too many tastings. It comes with a wooden box, so it is a tiny bit pricier than the Montifuad, well, about $55, but it does have a wooden box, if that means anything. It's also a little punchier, coming in at 47%. And I'm glad that they agreed to do this. We looked at some other spirits too. We looked at some Armagnac that was from 1992 vintages. And to be honest, these two cognacs were the two ones that really seemed to make the most sense. And they also had the staff seal of approval on them, which is kind of unusual because, you know, we're not generally picking casks of cognac. In fact, this is the first time we've done it in 5 years. And we chose two.
It shows we're delinquent too. You made the point. We should have been opening more of these things along the way. We can do ridiculous high age value tastings for people with cognacs. And we should do more cognac tastings, more Armagnac tastings.
For sure.
We got a ridiculous range of DeRosa too. That'll be a really, really cool Armagnac tasting.
Yeah, really baller Armagnac. Well, it's something we can definitely look into.
Maybe like Armagnac and absinthe.
I'll let you take the absinthe.
Sammy's really keen on an absinthe tasting. I think if we were to do a poll, I suspect it would not be uber popular.
I agree. Probably wouldn't, but I'm really trying to pioneer for him.
You could put in like a glass of Listerine and most people wouldn't realize it wasn't the same drink. I'm not kidding.
Not
So-
true. I love absinthe. I own like 4 different kinds. It's a fun spirit, but it's definitely not for everyone.
So just nosing back and forth, I'm getting more spice on this. This is reminding me of like ginger and molasses cookies on the nose.
Yes.
Some
Lots of-
nice toasted oak in there. It's definitely more oak forward than the last one. And I'd also say it's not as identifiably cognac or brandy on the nose as the Montifuad is either.
I kind of find it more so. I think the first one's just a little too velvety for me. This has got that grapey sharpness for me a little bit more.
Mhm.
You're definitely right though, the cask is louder. There's a lot of bourbony kind of notes coming across on the palate. This is way more my style. Not like I love both of them for sure, but this one I really, really love.
The palate is 100% cognac. I mean, the grape notes come out right away. But for me, I found they were hiding on the nose behind the oak. Like the oak was really the dominant note coming through, really decadent, really spicy. And that spice really carries through into the palate. Like this is almost a hot level of spice, like cinnamon spice.
Yeah.
Heat coming
Like
through.
Cinnamon was definitely a note that I was getting. I was like ginger and cinnamon kind of battling it out on the tongue a little bit. But there's a nice bit of acidity there that just keeps you salivating. That kind of tones down the oak for me. It's definitely the one I prefer of the two.
Dare we suggest that there might even be a touch of terroir in these, like a bit of a chalkiness to them?
I
Mhm.
would say so.
I look forward to trying them with just a little bit of time in the glass to see how they're gonna develop later on, because as I said, I'm not very experienced in cognac.
Well, the good news is we've got like a little bit of time here to let them sit, see how they evolve and see how our own tastes evolve through the tasting tonight. Yeah, it's interesting. I know originally like I was 100% more like I love the Tercinier more, but tasting it tonight, I don't know if it's something about the day, my mood, what I had for dinner, but I'm actually liking the Montifuad more tonight.
Nice.
Maybe I wanted something a little more sweet. I'm not sure. So those are the only non-single malts we have in tonight's lineup. And to be honest, like at first it seemed like a struggle. We were struggling to find 2 final products to make a range of 7 from 92 or 30 years of age. You'd be surprised. And we didn't want to repeat any products that we'd done in a previous 30 on 30 tasting. And some of you might say, but there was a Bowmore 30 in one of those tastings, but it was a different Bowmore 30. It was a different vintage. I think the last time we did the 2020, and I believe tonight's is the 2021 edition of the Bowmore 30. So that's kind of fun. Are you guys ready? Should we move on to the Tormore?
My favorite distilleries. I've been looking forward to this one.
Yeah. There's a few of us who've got a soft spot for Tormore Distillery. You know, I'm really excited that our friends at Elixir Distillers are now the owners of it. And can't wait to see what they actually managed to do with it because, yeah, it's an underrated distillery. And believe it or not, we actually still have a bottle of this in the store. But yeah, this is, share my screen here. Now, we did have to cheat a little bit on this one. This is actually a 1991 vintage Tormore, but, and it's only 29 years of age, so it's not quite a 30-year-old. But again, as we said, we were really struggling to find 3 bottles, and that's why we ended up with putting in the 2 cognacs, which I think was a cool idea. And compared to everything else in the lineup tonight, a fraction the price of everything else that we're trying. Kind of a fun way to start it out. But this is the Gordon MacPhail Tormore 1991. It was from a refill sherry, but in fact, I think everything from this point on in the tasting has some degree of sherry influence in it. 29 years of age, bottled at 51.5%. And like the Tercinier, it also comes in a wooden box if that's important to you. So,
These ones are slick as hell though. Careful with your hand over them.
yeah, because there's no closure or anything on it, but yeah, they're cool boxes. Harmony, why don't I start with you? What are you getting on the nose with this one?
Oh, it's like stewed fruits and apples and like, I mean, it's kind of typical fruit cake, but it smells creamy. Or waxy even. Yeah, it's
That fruitcake note. I mean, a lot of times people say, "Oh, there's like a fruitcake note on it," but like genuinely, like I'm not saying Christmas cake, but like I don't know, like this has definitely got like a fruit and raisin sort of loaf note to it on the nose.
yeah, it's really cool. It has a beautiful nose.
Bit of lemon loaf too, like a kind of like a semi-cakey lemon loaf.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't think of like a heavily it's not full of baking spices. It's just a lot of fruit, like stewed fruits. It's really nice, and you get a little bit of that of the cask on the nose. A little bit, you get a little bit of touch of wood there, or maybe I want to say a little bit of tobacco, but I don't know if it's from the rye that we had earlier. But
no, absolutely, like humidor and tobacco harmony. I agree with you fully.
Yeah. It's really pretty on the nose.
Yeah. So if you've been to a tasting that we've had and talked about Tormore before, you'll know that we've referred to it as, or at least I've referred to it as, what I would imagine a distillery would look like if Willy Wonka opened it. And this is why I say that it's kind of steampunk. It's quite retro. I've driven by it many times, but it's never been open to the public. So that's why I'm partly excited, because our friends the Elixirs will eventually one day let us wander through it. But it's a cool distillery. It's, there's so many drab distilleries in Scotland that were all built or renovated in the 60s and 70s that look identical, with the garage doors that open, and it's just fun. Like, it's a fun looking building, and apparently has a whole bunch of structural issues. So it's going to be a while before I get to go tour it. This is one of the many things recently discovered.
James asks what color Elixir is going to paint the smokestack. If it is not like green and purple Willy Wonka colors, I am going to be so disappointed.
Oh yeah, they got to leave it green. I mean, it matches those like faded copper roofs. Yeah, they can't paint it red, James, if that's where you're going with this one. Yeah, they're not painting it red. Well, at least I hope not. But yeah, I know Kurt and I have talked about Tormore many times amongst ourselves. We've bottled a cask of Tormore a couple of years ago from Berry Brothers and Rudd, which was a gorgeous cask. Just a tropical fruit bomb. This is a distillery that often has quite a bit of like a funk note to it too, but I don't know that we're going to see as much of that given the sherry influence that this had, even though it is a subtle sherry influence.
I found a little funk on the nose when I first dove into it, but it's been in my glass now for just over a half hour. It seems to have tapered off a little bit. The palate is nice, big and spicy.
Yeah, it is very spicy. Yeah. Kurt, thoughts?
Yeah, I get a little bit of a carrot cake note. I think that's kind of carrying a little bit of that creaminess that Harmony's referring to. A little bit of trifle too, those chocolate and cherry tones. It's really kind of chewy, dried fruits to me, like those summer fruit bars again that we talked about the other night. There's one that I want too. It's a little bit darker, I think, than I expected, and less on the big tropicals that I thought we would have right up front. And I kind of wish there was a bit more of that, to be honest, but I still love the style. This is right in my wheelhouse too.
Well, Kurt, I mean, I think what you're describing there is you're describing a whiskey that was matured in a cask that did not have much influence, that was perhaps tired, reused, and generally not the Gordon MacPhail style to put things into a tired old cask. They're generally putting them into fresh. If they're refilled, they're casks that still have some life left in them, like top quality wood. And you mean, you're right, like some of those Tormores that you and I love are incredibly spirit driven. And you'll sometimes still see that from Gordon MacPhail, but more in the bourbon cask. Like sherry's going to mask those tropical fruit notes way more than bourbon will.
This has such a perfect arrival, like your first, the sip, like the big sip you get when it hits the front of your tongue. It has such a perfect weight to it. That drinking strength is absolutely awesome for me.
Mm-hmm.
Good weight on the palate.
And it's natural drinking strength too.
Yeah, that's incredible. We talked about it the other night, saying like kind of the 46 to 52 for me is perfect, and you're just right at the upper end of that.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. I dare ask, but did either of you try drowning that?
It's
No.
old and it's sherry. Both things scream don't have water.
Agreed. I didn't either. I don't even have my little copper straw out tonight. I think it's behind me somewhere. So we're not even going to pull it out for that. As Kurt said, I think he and I are on the same page in this. There's nothing wrong with adding water, but generally as whiskey gets older, it doesn't take it as well. And I've found through experience that sherried whiskeys take water even less well. And so sherried and old, not a good idea to add water. But that's
Harmony, what's your take on water in whiskey as it relates to age and cask types and stuff like that?
I would agree. I am not a huge fan, especially as it gets older. I'm actually more quite offended if you put water in an older whiskey. I would rather just
no. Let me take that back. You don't. Yeah. Get away from it. You're going to hurt it.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you need to salivate, bring the saliva forward and chew it together. I'd rather that be your experience than adding water to an older whiskey. If the whiskey is already young and kind of like vibrant and playful, but it's just hot with alcohol, I would say go ahead. But I don't think anything in this lineup is going to need water tonight. Or just drink water in between,
Indeed.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of like grape stem on the finish of that Tormore. Like it's got that sort of dry tannin, slightly still, not herbal, but like, yeah, grape stem. A little bit of sweetness to it, kind of grassy.
Mm-hmm. All right, we're on to
Oh boy.
possibly one of the two whiskeys that convinced you to take part in tonight's tasting. We're on to the Springbank 30th. Now, I've had to go over to their website because this is not even on our website because we would probably be inundated with orders for something we can't even sell. We did receive only 2 bottles of this, and in classic KWM style, we decided we were going to open at least one of them. So we did that. We held one back just for the purpose of tonight's tasting, which is kind of cool. And then the other one was raffled in a ballot not so long ago. This whiskey, if I'm being honest, did provoke a little bit of silliness from people, including a 10+ page email about why somebody thought they should get it, which please don't ever send me. I'm not going to read it. I might skim it, but I'm not going to read it.
He'll assign it to one of his people to read and to There's
Yeah, I was
something-
driving in Scotland. Partly that was an exercise in understanding what, as the business owner, if I am an iceberg and people see the top third to a quarter of me, appreciating what lies below the surface. And yes, Sean had the great good fortune of reading said email while I was driving. But yeah, no, don't send me an email begging for something. Like, everybody, when we have a ballot, gets the same chance, unless we know you flip bottles, in which case you don't get the same chance. But everybody who we know doesn't flip bottles, or I'm pretty sure doesn't flip bottles, gets the same chance. And that's how one of these went out, and the other one went to tonight's tasting. So matured in bourbon and sherry casks, 46%. The color on that looks a little darker than the liquid we have here, so it might just be the perspective. I would say, having tasted this before, I'm thinking it leans a bit more towards bourbon than to the sherry. But yeah, I can't wait to try this.
I get like kind of like savory barbecue notes and also like a chalk minerality on here. Like almost really chalky, but lots of fruit, like tropical fruits for me.
Way more citrus than I expected. And
Yeah.
that kind of like dirty barnyardy cow shit note you look for in Springbank. It's kind of neat that when you see it at this age, it's kind of like how peat fades in an old Isla whiskey. Yeah, the peat is obviously softened here, but so is that barnyardy now. It's really, really cool.
Gross, Andrew.
What the actual?
I just felt I needed to like counteract the craziness that was going there. This was actually a birthday present from the missus, who is an Oilers fan. It's serves two purposes, one of which is she said she always wished I would wear a gold chain, which I won't. This is the only jewelry I own, including I don't have a wedding band because it's not in my family tradition. So, but I will make exceptions for comic novelty jewelry for situations such as tonight when the Flames are playing. I think it's Boston Bruins, and we got to get through this tasting so I can watch the rest of the game. Yeah, Kurt, you were saying way more citrusy than you were expecting?
Yeah.
Eva Ferg, I like that.
That's so good. I mean,
All right.
they need you to cheer for them because they're not playing so well.
Oh boy. Yeah, it has not been the season we thought it would be after the first 5 games, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Sorry guys, I kind of interrupted there. What else are we thinking about this Springbank?
Do you remember the Bowmore 28-year-old? That first one of those really sort of austere, very naked Bowmore's Diageo released as a special one.
Yeah.
That was such a like just simple, underdressed style of whiskey, but executed perfectly. That was like the absolutely gorgeous girl next door that the right people notice kind of thing. This Springbank to me is not Springbank in all the flashy ways that everybody looks for, but it's perfect. Like it's absolutely perfect. It's not loud and rambunctious like a lot of Springbanks. It's kind of tame, and the balance is phenomenal. Like the palate is even better than the nose.
Yeah. It is very subtle. It's very delicate. It's not as Springbanky on the nose as I think we might expect. Like, it doesn't have that dirty coastal Campbellton feel, but I do think it does creep into that style a bit more on the palate. But I agree, it's so delicate. It's almost like a waxy profile. I can see where you're going with that Bowmore note, because it is very clean. It's not like oozing salty coastal maritime. There's a twinge of that in there, but it's delicate, and it's really going into the tropical tones.
Got stuff burnt to the bottom of your stove, like, or to the bottom of your oven, and then you throw something in the oven, start cooking, and open it up, and this massive billow of nasty smoke comes out. It's almost like, to me, you've got a lemon meringue pie that you did that to. So suddenly it's like a smoked lemon meringue pie.
Yeah. There's so much citrus here. For me, I'd even say it's more like one of those like lemon custard tarts, like a creamy lemon custard tart. But yeah, it's pretty, it's beautiful. Phil, I know you were asking what it sold for. It was $2,000 a bottle. For the one bottle we sold, we had over 100 people 100 people were willing to pay $2,000 for that one bottle. So I know at least a couple of other shops retailed it for something close to what we did. I think there was a couple of others that pushed the limit on it a bit, but such is their prerogative. Springbank's always been very clear, and we try to respect that they expect the retailers to price things fairly. So, you know, when we get things that are very limited and we don't get very many bottles, we're not going to sell them for like a rock bottom margin, but we're also not going to gouge people, because Springbank's very clear that they want the bottles to get to people at a fair price, which in some ways almost makes the whole thing worse, because when there's not enough to go around in the first place, and the price, especially for things like Springbank 18 and 21, is comparatively quite good. It doesn't help with the whole FOMO, but what are you going to do? Yeah, this is a beautiful whiskey. Yeah, I think it tasted slightly better in the old washback bar. I think that's what they call the new bar at Springbank than it does tonight, but that's just a suspicion I have. I might be wrong.
You probably have also a lot of added aromas to that experience, which probably heighten the tasting as well.
You mean Walter?
Yeah.
He got that fresh out of the backyard smell. No, I'm just kidding. It's pretty good right now. But anyway, yeah, it's cool. The smoke is really creeping in there. Like, I can't believe it wasn't there at first, but it's now actually quite sharp. Like, I can't believe how kind of pinpoint precise that smoke note is coming in.
On the palate, I'm not getting so much on the nose.
100%. It's on the palate. It's not on the nose.
Yeah, and Harmony's note there about that minerally kind of note. I'm getting a little bit of Flintstone vitamins on the nose. It kind of carries that minerally, sort of vaguely fruity, dusty sort of note to it almost.
Mm-hmm.
Andy came by. Andy Dunner, local agent, for those of you who don't know him. Could not be a better ambassador for Springbank, of course. Andy came by a couple days ago and generously poured out an awful lot of his bottle of Springbank 10 PX the other day.
Oh,
and it was one of those, Andrew and I romantically locked eyes and went, oh man, I didn't want to love it this much. This is really damn good. And
I actually wanted it to not like it specifically so that I wouldn't fear missing out on it. So yeah. I have FOMO. I know Harmony's got FOMO. But
that's what this whiskey is too, Andrew. I didn't even bother asking or putting my name in even random for this. I knew it had to go elsewhere. Man, I want a bottle of this whiskey now.
Well,
good thing we got to drink it.
What's that?
Good thing we all got to drink it. That's what matters.
Yeah, 40 plus people are going to get to drink it rather than one more person collect it and maybe open it or maybe not.
Because I would largely afford it. There'd be like a handful of my friends who would drink half the bottle and the rest of it I would drink. I can't buy it. So it's better we all do this together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I don't think we should dwell on that one too much longer. We should probably move on to the Bowmore, but much like the Springbank, these Bowmore 30s, we don't get many of them. We do have the 2022 release coming in shortly, though it has to be said with an eye-watering price increase from this past year. So it's unfortunate, but I mean, Bowmore 30, I guess, is still Bowmore 30, and there's not a lot of it to be had. I also want to just throw out there, I am still going through serious regret over not purchasing the Bowmore Sea Dragon back in the day when I could acquire one for less than $200, but I didn't have less than $200, so I couldn't. But it is, I think more than anything, that is the one bottle that got away from me. I've had a chance to try it a couple times. It's a gorgeous whiskey, and it looked down on me from the whiskey shelves, which were not as tall back then as they are now, but it still was up here looking at me, and I remember the day the last one left, and I there was a little twinge of sadness when it went, because I wanted it for myself. But children, bills, other responsibilities, it was not to be. I'm going to show you guys the bottle here. Now, I think the ABV we have on the actual bottle is not entirely correct. It says 46%, which I don't think is accurate. I'm pretty sure that it's
45.1.
Yeah, I think that, because then the 2022 I think is 45.3. So I just want to see if I can track down on Yon Whiskey Base the actual strength of this one. So oh man, they don't even have they've got the Sea Dragon on here, but that's not helpful. 2021 edition. Yeah, Harmony, good memory. It is 45.1. So I'm just going to see if they have past release of this on their site, because yeah, well, it doesn't, I can't see it. I'm not going to spend too much time hunting for it. But we only received one of these and we opened it. So that's why it's not on our website. This is what she looks like. Just ignore that 45.3 there. That might have even been the 2020 release, 45.3. But there is definitely a sherry note here. There's some Parma violets on the nose, so, and not an overabundance of them, but so I'm excited. There's some salt and smoke, salted caramel. Anyway, it comes in a wooden box with a frosted glass front that I'm guessing is supposed to represent the tempestuous ocean at the door of the Bowmore distillery. But anyway, back to the whiskey. What are our thoughts on this one?
It's a little dirtier and more chocolatey than I expected. The sherry's way bigger. We talked about them in a previous tasting way back, and somebody, and I'm looking at Jeff already here, it could have been Sky perhaps even, those cookie wafer type things, the really thin ones with the bit of figgy stuff in the middle or whatever they are.
Charleston Chew kind of thing.
No, it's like a cookie type thing.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, because I thought that when I was smelling it.
But you
Not
know,
like a Fig Newton.
Harmony, your Charleston Chew one though has given me like a tasting note that is succinct to this. It's those backwoods, like little cigarillos. And Rob White, who back in the day was the Bowmore rep, and awesome dude, who is the Bowmore rep for Alberta, back in the Severio Chirali days. We're going back quite a ways here. He loved those backwoods cigarillos. In fact, Chris, who worked with us, I'm pretty sure she used to smoke those at one point in time too, because they've got a very distinct aroma and taste to them. I tried one once, but it reminds me of that.
Dave nailed it. It's the Garibaldis.
The Garibaldis.
It's very Bowmore, right? Like it's got that grapey tone when they get older. It's got that sort of slightly floral tone behind it. It's got a little bit of ashiness, a lot of that salty character.
Oh, it's starting to go tropical too on the palate. Like even with the sherry, even with that lavender tone, even with the peat and salt, that tropical juicy fruit is starting to creep through too.
It takes a while to get there though. It's way at the back end before it starts to get a little bit tropical. You got to get past the raisins and chocolate first, I think.
Mm-hmm. There is a ton of raisins and chocolate on there. I think that glossette's a really good note too.
Very cool.
Drying, as Shlomo said, getting a bit nuttier on the finish. I am going to find a photo here of the old Sea Dragon, just so you guys can see what I'm still pining over.
Jamie's right when he talks about the tropical note really kicking in from 15 to 18. The more recent batches of the 18, obviously, we're kind of coming out of that floral sort of period. The recent 18s are extremely grapey in all the right ways, like juicy as hell, right into the deeper tropical side of the pool. Very, very good whiskey. It's nice to see people flying.
Look at this sexy bottle. This is back before they were trying to make whiskey appeal to the Chinese. And yet it kind of looks like they were trying to make whiskey appeal to the Chinese. But I know someone who has one of these. I don't know, maybe I can sweet talk him into giving me like a good buddy deal on it, but yeah, so much regret. Calvin Coolidge said we should not live with regret once upon a time, but I have regret over that one bottle, not many other things. Any other thoughts on that, guys, before we move on to more familiar territory?
No, it's beautiful. I love it, how it develops. It's really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. All right, we are on to something many of you may have tried before, but it's still delicious. It's still gorgeous and fun to put into a tasting. And this is one of those ones where I still have to pinch myself that we actually got to bottle this as a cask, because at one point they tried, well, I shouldn't say this. At one point there was a rumor they were trying to back out of it, I think because they realized between when we selected it at the price offered and when they finally got around to bottling it, they realized there was not so much 92 left. And in the months that followed the bottling of this whiskey, they did bottle another cask as part of their 2022 releases that is more than double the price, which is arriving in just a couple of months' time. So this is one of those ones where, yeah, 29-year-old 1992 flawless old school sherried Glenfarclas that we're able to sell at $600 is crazy. As of recently, and this is actually faster than I thought, we're a little over halfway sold on this whiskey, which I was budgeting for 2 years. I was like, this is going to take us 2 years to sell because there's almost 600 bottles and they're $600 a piece. Not everybody can, admittedly afford a bottle of this or get away with purchasing a bottle of this, but you should, because you're never going to see old school, almost 30-year-old sherried whiskey like this again.
This one's going to go in waves, Andrew. You had your first push, then you're going to get people finish their first bottle and realize that she was second, and then you're going to get people to panic when you're after the last three.
And you know who's going to be ahead of the curve on that? I shouldn't out him on this, but Dr. Jerry. We'll know when that final wave is coming because Dr. Jerry will strike first. He just has a preternatural sense about these things, and possibly other things we're not aware of. But yeah, but honestly, one of the things we've talked about, and it'll probably happen if we still have this. I mean, if it's sold out, I'd kind of be disappointed if it's sold out in the next few months, like if all of a sudden there was a surge. But if it doesn't, one of the things we've talked about is on the anniversary we launched it, it might start getting an annual inflation adjusted price increase, only because this was not a small investment for us. And inflation is kind of a thing right now. And I hate to be the guy who mentions that, but we're not going to do something like bonkers, like double the price or add $100 to it. But we talked about adding a reasonable increase to it because the longer we have this, the better value it's going to be. And yeah, I'm also worried that at some point we're going to get pressure from Glenfarclas to raise our price on it.
I want to drink lots of this whiskey. This is normally like a one at the end of the night for me kind of style, but I love this cask a lot.
Gabby likes this whiskey.
You're not supposed to do that, right, Harmony?
I know. I just like opened it and put it in my glass, and she's been like sniffing around me and nudging me. She does prefer the sherry cask whiskeys, I've noticed. She always tries to lick the empty glasses of the sherry ones. She's got good taste.
Yeah, this is a gorgeous whiskey, and I'm not going to mention names, but someone wrote a note in here. I bought a case, and now I'm wondering if I should buy a second. And also, Jeff apparently bullied somebody into buying 2 bottles of it. I'm just kidding, Jeff. I'm exaggerating that a little bit and dialing it up, but this is one of those ones, and I've talked about this before. Like, there's 5 whiskeys that I can look back on over the last 20 years that were like incredibly cool pickups that the store had, like the Glendronach 1972, like the Port Ellen 25-year-old, like the Benriach 83, and like that Glendronach 72. That was a whiskey where there was a handful of people that were like, I'm going to buy a case of this because I want to have a bottle of this until I'm not drinking anymore. And I want to be able to have a bottle in the bar. And I mean, it's kind of a crazy thought because like you're buying stuff, but the reality is stuff like this is not going to come around again. We're still like, I remember when we were offered the samples, and I kind of just agreed to taste samples because I didn't think we would agree. I didn't think they would send us not that Glenfarclas would send us a bad cask, but I didn't think they would send us an old school sherry cask. I didn't think that it would be good enough to justify the gamble of buying 600 bottles of it. And it was. And I think this was about maybe 3 or 4 months before Harmony joined. And I don't even remember who was in my office, but it was probably Sean, Kurt, maybe Evan and I. And we tried it. And like, I'm like, guys, I don't think this is going to happen, but we're going to try these 2 samples. And the first sample was okay, but not worth rolling the dice on. And I remember this one was just like, oh shit, we have to buy this. Somehow I'm going to have to finance this. And it was going back to when I bought that Glendronach 72, when I was in the warehouse at Glendronach with a cast of locals who've been to a lot of the tastings for years and years. And when they all tried it, I looked at them, I was like, oh man, I got to find a way to get my boss to let me buy this at that point in time. And yeah, this is one of those casks, and I'm not kidding. I still can't believe we've got it. And any nerves I had about purchasing it when we committed to it have been completely undone by the fact that the market for old and rare whiskeys and the quantity that's available of them has continued to decline over the 2 years. And every moment that we have this, it looks like a better and better deal.
And that Glendronach you mentioned, a bottle of that now is about the same price as a case of this Glenfarclas, which is ridiculous.
Or more. Like I've seen it as high as 7,000 or 8,000, which I personally think is crazy. But yeah, so we are not suggesting you buy this as an investment. Please do not do that. But if you want multiple bottles so that you can open them at special points, cool. Because you know you're not gonna be able to get that price. But yeah, it's an awesome whiskey. It's in our top 5 casks we've ever bottled. And I say this every time we taste it. I have to give a huge shout out to Michelle at Pacific Wine and Spirits, because it would not have happened without her. So big shout out to Michelle.
So,
And
sorry,
sorry if I may, one last thing to our boy George. He's not with the family biz anymore, but this all got rolling because of him. So George, wherever you are. Kurt, I interrupted you quite rudely.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what have you done for me lately? How are you going to top this one now?
That's tough. I don't know. Well, I mean, you guys were already chatting about a Bladnock that's coming, so I don't know if that'll top it, but it's pretty bloody gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
And there's only 50-ish bottles, like 54, I think, is the total outturn. And if that's not divisible by 6, there'll be less than that. So, yeah, or 3. It might be coming as a 3-pack. James is nodding. It's coming as a 3-pack. So regardless, there's not a lot of it. It's an absolutely gorgeous whiskey. Yeah. I know we need to move on to the Glengoyne 30, but I kind of don't want to. I'm kind of enjoying this. And even in the wake of the Springbank and Bowmore, which are almost 4 and like 5 times the price. I'm really enjoying this one. But we'll move on. I don't think I put the link in the chat there, but I'll fire it in there if you haven't got it. One last thing about this, don't wait to see this go on sale. It will never go on sale for more than like 10% if you take part in a tasting. If we have one of our semi-annual sales, it might go 10%, but it will never go any more than that on sale because we don't need to get rid of this. We're never going to get this again. So, Glengoyne 30-year-olds. We've tried this many times, not recently. And let's see how it stacks up because it's been a while since we've had it. I think we tasted this with Gordon Dundas last year. Does that ring a bell for anybody?
Probably.
Oh yeah.
And and this may or may not be the same stock, because we poured this tasting from our last shipment of Glengoyne 30, and we just got a new shipment of Glengoyne 30. And the price has gone up. I think Glengoyne, much like Glenfarclas, has been going through the trying to figure out how to better meet supply demand at the price point, because there was a time as little as maybe 3 years ago when this was under $1,000. So it's gone up. It's a little over 1,500 now, but it's even more rare. Like when we get this now, we get 2, maybe 3 bottles 2 to 3 times a year. It's limited because relative to something like Macallan 30, which would be a comparable style wise, this is less than a quarter the price. So what are our thoughts on the Glengoyne 30-year?
I like how the tasting notes said like rum and raisin chocolate, because my first note was like a rum soaked fruit cake. So I'm
Sherry
it's nice to be
trifle.
on point. Yeah.
It's nice, but I will trade you my glass for your Glenfarclas, Andrew.
I can't do that for both physical and personal reasons. But I agree. I mean, the nose on it is, especially after the last 3 whiskeys, is a little, actually, who am I kidding? The last 4 whiskeys is a bit underwhelming.
No.
It's a bit one-dimensional. It's kind of a bit dumpy.
It's fudgy, actually. That chocolatey note is really fudgy, like almost thick, and it's good. I just hope for more fruits in the sherry, not just those big fudgy kind of tones. Chocolatey and spicy more than anything.
Yeah.
I'm happily drinking it, and at that price point, I would still buy it, to be honest, nowadays, because those sherry whiskeys, they just don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
So at some point, you want to be able to drink them. Yeah, you just have to pay for them now. It sucks, but
Yeah.
I think 1,500 is still a fair price, all things considered, which is stupid because that price is too high.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the problem is the start where many of us started and where we are now is probably, I mean, let's go back to the Glengoyne 25. Like when that first came out, like 6-7 years ago, like there were times when we got a deal and we were offering it for $300 a bottle. And I mean, that was 6-7 years ago, 5-6-7 years ago, something like that. It's hard to be confident of that. But then go back to, you and I remember, Kurt, we've talked about this many times, when the first Glenfarclas 40-year-old came out, and it was under $400 a bottle. So yeah, things have got away from us a little bit. Supply is definitely not there. I agree with you that this is good. I just think it's sort of underwhelming in the wake of the 3 that it just followed. Well, I'll be honest, the 4 that it just followed, because going back even to that Tormore, there's something about that I find a little bit more enticing, a little bit more depth to. I find this is kind of one of those sort of very sort of closed focused styles, and it's just so much about the sherry and not about a lot of other things.
That Tormore actually shows better on the palate too, because I poured these all at the same time. This
Mhm.
one seems a little bit flatter. That Tormore still got a crazy vibrancy and food in the same palate.
It's
I
still
really
good.
like that Tormore a lot.
Yeah, it's still good. The finish on it's good. And I mean, we'll tell anyone who comes in and listens, like if you're looking for Macallan 18, 21, 25, 30, generally speaking, Glengoyne is going to offer you as good or better a whiskey at a much lower price point. And the important fact to know in all this is that Glengoyne and its sister distillery Tamdhu used to be owned by the Edrington Group. They were part of the same company that owns Macallan. And they are still sourcing the same casks that they did when they were owned by Edrington, even as Macallan has itself at least partially moved away to a more sherry seasoned cask rather than a sherry maturation casks profile. So generally speaking, Tamdhu and Glengoyne, I feel are more of that old school sherry style than Macallan is itself. Which is not to say we've tried it. We tried the Macallan 18 last year. We've done the 12 a couple times, and it's very good for what it is. Like they're well-made whiskeys, but they're not what they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, I think there's too many tired barrels at Macallan at this point, and too many new seasoned barrels at Macallan at this point. You're dead on accurate. Even Glendronach isn't where we kind of point our eyes now when we're looking for sherry. Harmony would probably stay the same. You're typically looking to Tamdhu, you're typically looking to Glengoyne or Glenallachie, I think more than anybody at this point for a big sherry.
Mhm. All right. Kurt and Harmony, I might lean on you guys for a moment here to get the speed round, as we like to call it, going back and revisiting, because I'm just going to get the poll set up. So I don't know if who wants to take charge of that. Who's going to lead on this one?
Harmony.
I'll start by saying the Montifuad cognac is so sour on the nose now after having that like dry and tanning, spicy Glengoyne. It is not appealing to me at this moment,
Oh,
at least on the nose. I don't know what it is exactly, but
It's a little bit of Old Spice cologne.
maybe that's it.
I think it's like grape must to me. Like
It
that's
smells like cologne. Yeah.
Well, cognac is generally a very
Well,
perfumed style of spirit.
yeah.
I'm sorry it's turned on. I still really dig it.
The palate is nice, like it's better than the nose for me after all that, but it's really grapey and there's almost like an agave note to it. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not digging it,
What about
but maybe it just doesn't follow well after the scotch.
now compare the other one?
Okay. Much better. Yeah, it's cool. The Tercinier, it offers a lot. It's like a roller coaster of flavors and fruits and spices and tannins, and yeah, it's very cool. Even little, I mean, like eucalyptus even and chamomile.
Yes, eucalyptus is a great note.
Yeah.
Hulls, like the dark purple hulls, black currant,
Yeah.
with the eucalyptus and fruits at the same time.
Yeah, it's almost like, to me, like, you know, when you're younger and you have that like that toothpaste that comes out like red and blue and white. It's not overly pepperminty. I kind of get that on the finish.
What kid doesn't want that toothpaste and has to go through, you know, the barricade of your parents saying no? Parents. All right, whiskeys. What do you think of the Tormore now, Harmony?
they have this like slight mild cheesiness to it. The minerality's still there, the fruits are still there. What do you think, Kurt? It's nice.
I like that you say cheesiness there, because I think that comes back to that carrot cake, I was getting the first time around. It's got like cream
Mhm.
cheese kind of almost, and still those big carrot sort of vegetable notes behind a lot of fruits too. Really good whiskey to me. I could see that slightly more herbaceous vegetable note kind of being outside what most people are looking for here. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. Carrot cake with cream cheese icing, Phil, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. You got the pineapples in there, you got the nuts even, and just a touch of spice.
Carrot cake, I'm gonna interject here, should never have pineapple in it. Pineapple
Or
or
nuts.
good carrot cake. Just
Or
throwing that out there.
I like all of those things, just don't put them on my carrot cake. Just don't.
Well, I respectfully disagree. I like all those things.
We need a do-over.
Put it in a cake with icing on it. I'll eat it. It's fine.
Harmony, you weren't there, sadly. This was a couple of years back. There was a birthday cake brought in for Andrew one year because he's a carrot cake fiend like I am. And this was like the most monolithic slab of carrot cake I've ever seen in my life. It was amazing. We need to get Sean to have a do-over for Andrew's birthday. It's coming up really quick, isn't it?
No, it's already passed. I quietly let it pass.
What?
Yeah. Chloe brought in a carrot cake. She made one. It was like
She
2
did
weeks
make
ago.
one, but I didn't come in that day because I'd already eaten it. And
Oh,
Yeah, that's right.
yes, I discreetly spoke to you, Andrew. We need to have a proper birthday celebration.
but not for me. I don't like that. Everybody else is cool, but I can do without.
Okay, it's my place and drink a lot of really expensive whiskey one night then.
So funny story about funny story about the carrot cake, because back in the old days when Daryl Corbett was our manager, who he now works at Willow Park, and Crave Cupcakes had just opened, and we found out they were also baking cakes. He purchased what was at that time and was for many years the most expensive cake ever purchased for someone's birthday. I think he spent like $100 on this carrot cake from Crave Cupcakes that was so dense and so heavy that by the time he brought it to the store, the middle had started to collapse in on itself. But also he doubled down, and I remember Nancy, the old owner, was livid because he even bought, there was this like 5 plastic train handled choo-choo set that he bought as well and put on the cake. It was an awesome cake and it was hella funny. But I'll never forget that because I think that was the beginning of the end for Daryl. Like Nancy never let that go, that he bought this outrageous cake. Anyway, how's that Springbank holding up?
Let's find out. Harmony, what do you think?
It's really nice. It still holds up. And I don't think I don't know, I never thought I would say this, but I think I like the Bowmore 30 more. There's nothing wrong with the Springbank by any means, but
That's throwing it down, Harmony.
I know I'm really sorry, guys. Please don't fire me. I'm really trying.
James, in response to your Cheesecake Cafe question, I think the closest Cheesecake Cafe is actually in Lethbridge. If it's what's that?
Did they close the one on McLeod?
Mhm.
Oh, I don't know. I didn't think Calgary had one, but I'm pretty sure Lethbridge still has one.
They
Yeah.
definitely have one. But I don't know if it's still there.
They had the best mushroom cheddar chowder, and I don't even like mushroom soup, and their dry ribs were off the chain.
It's not, Kurt, I never thought you would talk about a mushroom cheddar chowder.
So
in a
good.
whiskey, but it must have been mind-blowing. So
It was in a bread bowl too. It was just an absolute heart attack. It was thick and gooey and lots of carbs and sugar and all that kind of fun stuff.
I'm going to throw this out there quickly on the Springbank. I love it. It's actually quite a naked 30-year-old Springbank. Apparently there is a Cheesecake Cafe in Willow Park, which wouldn't help me because I rarely leave a 2 kilometer circumference from where I live, which is in kind of Nob Hill, Marteloupish area. But unless I'm leaving the city. So, but good to know, Cheesecake Cafe, because I think my parents love the Cheesecake Cafe. But back to that.
The one on McLeod is still open. Sorry.
There we go. That must be the one that Robin and Shannon are referring to. So James, we've solved that riddle. You do not have to travel to Lethbridge, Alberta, or LA as we call it here, to get Cheesecake Cafe cakes. You can go to McLeod Trail. But yeah, that I love the Springbank. This is such a naked, like for 30 years of age, the cask influence on this is so subtle. Yeah, this is one of those ones where I wanted to dislike this more than I do, because it, you know, it makes you wish you had one tucked away somewhere, and there is not one tucked away somewhere.
That might be part of my philosophy. It's like, don't love it because you don't have it. Just don't. James is nodding. He's in agreement.
James, you should have dinner with Daryl there, because Daryl is a hell of a guy. Hell of a guy. All right. Bowmore 30. I love Bowmore. Most people know that. I like this style of Bowmore too. Harmony, how's it doing? Or Kurt?
It's holding up really well. Really, really juicy. The fruits are coming way more out. The ashiness is kind of backseating it a little bit. Not quite as chocolatey too. The Springbank really, really shows well on the palate. But when you come to this, it's just so vibrant and so rich. This is cool, Bowmore. I didn't have high expectations. Andrew, you're a Bowmore guy too. How do you feel like this sits in the Bowmore pantheon?
It's great because it's not just like full on Parma violets. There's a lot of other depth there. It's getting like that to that tropical. It's not like as tropical as some of those like 64s, but there's some of that there. The salt and smoke are balanced. Yeah. This is, and it's a style that, like, this is kind of like Springbank, kind of like Old Talisker, kind of like Clynelish. It's one of just a handful of distilleries that has such a singular style to it, and it's like comforting. Like you can taste it and you know where it's from. I mean, there's times when I used to hate this game, but like people used to test me when I would show up at the Victoria Whiskey Festival. They'd like have a flask and they'd shove it in my face and they're like, "What distillery is this?" And like maybe like one out of every, I don't know, 3 or 4 times I'd get it wrong, and they'd be like, "This is," like, it was kind of like making a point. And it's like, well, you know, this isn't exactly science here, but it's such a singular style. It's so identifiable. And when it's good, to me, it's just, I love it. So
some of the best nights of my life have been spent in Bowmore at night. And this just absolutely takes me there.
Mm-hmm. It's lovely. I had a tasting note before, which was, you know, I know the Flintstone vitamins came up before, but it would be like if you'd somehow managed to find a way to smoke Flintstone vitamins with mussels. Like you actually smoke the mussels to smoke the Flintstone vitamins. I know I'm getting a bit carried away with that, but
I love it.
All right.
Tasting notes are my favorite tasting notes.
Yeah. Well, we're not going as offside as we did during the rum tasting, where one of my tasting notes was embalming fluid in a Build-A-Bear workshop, was what I smelled on the rum. I did not love that rum. And it was interestingly not the most objectionable rum in that tasting.
Wow.
Although there were some really good rums in that tasting, but there was 2 that were a little questionable.
I find that the rums that Sean chooses have often an extremely offensive nose. Extremely offensive and unapproachable. But if you can plug your nose and taste them, they're all right.
Yeah.
if I have to plug my nose to taste it,
That's-
like some of those bottles, you should be calling an exorcist for it. Like they're
Oh
that's-
man, they're horrible. I'm like, it smells like compost vomit. That's
yes, absolutely.
and he's like, oh yeah, it's great. It's from this. I'm like, I don't need to know anymore. Yeah, and he's like, there's 3 more like it. I'm like, oh, and we have those for people to buy. And he's like, yeah, it's almost sold out. People are crazy.
I think the one Andrew's referring to that he mentioned the embalming fluid and stuff was like if the smell of really rancid compost was your baseline, and then it got the compost from there. Like that's how bad that one is.
You know what would be a good tasting note for some of those rancid rums is like New York City on a hot day.
Yeah, that's right.
Subway, New
It's
York
like,
Subway on a hot day.
I don't get the love of New York City. It's loud, it's noisy, it smells like garbage, and like there's no rules for crossing streets and stuff like that. So
It's kind of like that around Union in San Francisco too. If you spent time in San Francisco, it's a little stanky in the core there.
anyway, quick note on the comments in there. We're planning a hella cool Lafroig tasting for some point in the near future. Once again, we often get like 1 bottle of the Lafroig Ian Hunters, and then they end up in my office because I don't know what to do with them, and I don't want to just send out an offer and then 1 person gets a bottle. So we have at least 3, possibly 4 Ian Hunter releases and a couple of 25s. So we're putting to, oh right, Kurt, we're putting together an old Lafroig tasting, and it will not be inexpensive, but it'll be worth it, and it'll be hella cool, and it'll be a lot of old Bowmore. So Lafroig.
Like
Done.
super cool. When do you ever get to drink whiskey like this? Like Andrew and I had a bit of a chat the other day because we're looking at 7 Lafroigs of stupid age statements, starting with lower, which apparently is 13 to 19 years, and then everything from there goes 25 and up.
We're going to be very close to 200 years of Lafroig.
Yeah. And I know we've got 2 different Lafroig 25s, but I talked to Andrew about maybe selling one of my older ones back to the store as well. So if all goes well, we'll be looking at lower, 3 different 25s, and then 3 30+ Bowmores. It's going to be absolutely crazy. Can't wait.
Good tasting. All right, I've already tasted the 92 Glenfarclas again. It is still great. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. It's still great. Anyone have anything to add to that? No.
Nope, it's
Yes.
great. I'm gonna save what's little is left for after this.
I am not done drinking this whiskey tonight. I'm going to drink more of this whiskey tonight. It's going to
What? That was supposed to be in Andrew's office. What are you doing with that?
All right, I jumped ahead to the Glengoyne, which smells like you're pulling like Aussie licorice out of a bag of prunes.
What's Aussie licorice?
Aussie licorice is like the kind of, it's like thick. It's not like Twizzlers. It's
Okay.
sort of thick, sticky, usually wet, a little bit wet licorice, and it's delicious. So
I think there might have been 1 dud cask in that vat. I think there's a wee little bit of sulfur.
there's definitely some sulfur. I'm getting sulfur on the nose and palate now. I didn't get it the first time around, but having gone back through, I didn't want to point it out because I will acknowledge I am not Kensington Wine Market's, not even best. I'm not even second or third best sulfur hound in the store. I'm probably 4th. Because I don't mind it at times, but yeah, it's weird how sometimes that nutty, dry Oloroso note is so closely associated with sulfur, but I think it actually is slightly bleeding into sulfur on this one.
I think too, there's an element of overthinking ourselves out of affirming what we initially get. Your first impression is generally right. And I stuck my nose in this and thought it was kind of sulfury, and then I just kept like pulling long smells off it until I think you kind of look past that sulfur and see all the other stuff. But there's definitely sulfur.
Yeah. I'm going to trigger the vote now, and then I'm going to try to answer James's question, which Kurt might be able to do as well, because we both have bottles of these at home. So I might pour another dram of Glenfarclas 92 to see if it's any different. I guess the difficulty is we didn't pour and open this at the same time as the one tasted, but yeah, I'm curious to see how it has evolved myself. So
It's gonna be hard to pick two out of this tasting. Like,
oh, I know.
this is a very cool tasting.
I'm going to make a prediction here. I'm going to predict, despite them being interesting and good value, the cognacs are probably not going to do well.
Agreed.
But that also might be the crowd. So fair enough. But James, your question is an interesting one about what happens to a Glenfarclas 92 after being open for a while. And it's something we've not talked about, at least in a tasting that I've been in on recently, but bottles definitely do have like a life, much like a bottle of wine does, like a whiskey bottle, especially once it's been opened. I do think if they're stored properly, bottles last longer than a lot of people will tell you they do. If it's stored in a cool place, if the cork's intact. Like I've had bottles that I've not opened for 10 years that I've gone back to and they're still great. That's a risk because if the seal's not good, you're always running that risk. But I've also noticed, and one of the whiskeys that sticks out and it's like seared in my brain was a Gordon MacPhail 1953 Glengrant. And this was back when these almost 50-year-old Glengrants were under $200 a bottle, which is crazy to think in today's terms, but like almost 20 years ago when I started, you could buy these 50-year-old almost whiskeys for $180, $190. Like it's almost mind-blowing to think about this. And I remember we opened one for a tasting and it was good, but it was kind of closed when we first opened it. And unlike my predecessors at the shop back in the day, I would keep, if we opened a bottle for a tasting, I would keep it in the store to pour customers. I mean, Kurt would have been one of these in the early days when they came in, and I would not take that bottle home until we'd sold out of everything that we possibly could of it. And that one bottle I remember specifically tasted best a month after it was opened, and then it declined after that. And it never got bad, but it was at its peak expressiveness, if that's about 1 month after it was opened. So it's a very good question. And that's something that's kind of really hard to pin down on each individual whiskey. But my bottle of, and the sample we had tonight of the Glenfarclas 1992 smell actually quite similar. Like I'm not getting a ton of differences off it. The one in my glass has obviously been oxidizing now for almost an hour and a half, whereas this one's not. So mainly getting more alcohol on this, but it's amazing how the aromas are very, very close to each other. So those things can happen. Kurt, I'm sure you've noticed this too with things that you've had open for a long time, that they can change. Some things do eventually fall apart, which is really sad when you realize you saved one last dram and it fell apart. But I've been surprised by how long things will hold together.
Oxidation is the key to whiskey. It's not time and wood so much as it's just time oxidizing. These kind of whiskeys are super cool to me, where it's been allowed enough time to do that. And I think too, coming to your point there, there's too many people that feel like they need to finish their bottles when they open them, and they rob themselves of that experience. It's kind of why we refer to it being a little rough off the cork a lot of times, right? Pop it open, pour yourself a dram, that first glass, let sit for 10 or 15 minutes before you even approach it. As you go through that bottle, it's just going to get probably a little bit softer and softer and softer. You only really need to rush when you get into the last fifth or so, I would say. You got lots of time on the bottle, tons and tons of time.
I'm sharing the results from the poll, and not surprised, but I do kind of love how all 5 of the single malts in here at least got a little bit of love. in tonight's tasting, first and second choice. It's neck and neck for the Springbank 30-year and the Bowmore 30-year, with the Glenfarclas 92 a close second. But on the back stretch, look at that. The Glenfarclas just stealing the show. And the Montifuad gets a vote, and the Tercinier didn't even get a vote. So I love that, because I don't know why, but of the two, that's the one that's actually resonating with me more tonight. And I think it's resonating more with me because it just, as a cognac, it is more stylistically cognac than the Tercinier is. Though they're both good and they're both fun. All right, I'm going to start with Harmony. Harmony, what were your two favorites tonight in the tasting, if you had to choose two favorites?
Well, choosing two is just mean. I really like the Bowmore 30, and as things have changed in the glass, I'm torn between the Tormore and the cognacs. To be honest, I can't tell which one I like more. But they're both quite lovely. But maybe Tormore, I think, just by a fraction of there. Just trying these cognacs tonight have made me very curious to know what else there is out there that's a little bit older, a little bit more mature. I've tried younger, like Hennessy's and stuff, like decades ago, but yeah, I'm curious to try more. Hopefully I can maybe sit in on that spirits tasting. But yeah, it's cool. It's cool to try them together. They're very drastically different. Going back now, I have a little bit of the Chateau Montifuad in my glass, and I'm getting like it's a weird tasting note. I don't know. It's like
I'm getting my mom's crabapple jelly on the nose right now.
okay. Yeah, I get like jelly and like maybe even like like a stale sour peach candy note. And then like there's also this like weird powdery like baby powder kind of thing happening. But it's not quite that. That's not the right word, but that's where it's taking me, and it's kind of weird. Maybe it's like linens. It's not unpleasant, but for me, the Bowmore 30 was pretty cool. And the Springbank is nice, but I feel like that's obvious.
Igor has messaged on Facebook, there's a sponge Lafroig coming. So we may or may not have to factor that into things, but we'll see here. All right, Kurt, I'm putting you on the spot now. Your two favorites tonight.
I love the Springbank. It's right in my wheelhouse. I wish I could say I'm going to be more interesting than that, but the Springbank is really good. From there, I don't know, man. The Bowmore 30 and the Glenfarclas KWM. It'd be a toss-up as to which one I want the next dram of. I think probably consistently I would reach for the Glenfarclas, but the Bowmore is a little bit of a treat, right? And if this lineup was any different, if we didn't have that Springbank in there, or maybe the Bowmore even, the Tercinier, I love that. I love that combo. I don't know why they gave us a cask like that. That's one of those ones where you look at it and you're like, man, they shouldn't have let that go. We're lucky we have that.
Agreed. I'm really torn. My instinct is to go Bowmore Springbank, but I'm actually going to go Bowmore Glenfarclas. And part of the reason for that is I really like that style of Springbank. But for me, it finishes really short. It doesn't seem to have like a staying power to it, whereas both the Bowmore and the Glenfarclas have a staying power. So I like that. I like that long finish. Yeah, I'm glad I own at least one of those bottles, knowing that I will not own the other two. And I'm happy with that. So yeah, because I have more whiskey than I'm ever going to drink, if I'm being honest. So yeah.
Hands up if you want to help.
Yeah, let us
Exactly.
know what day and time works for you, Andrew.
As soon as the missus is away on business again, we'll figure something out on that front, but
Give us a week's notice. Bill, Sue, out of towners, how much notice do you need?
everyone knows that Andrew's life
5
doesn't-
days, got it.
Everyone
2
knows
days, they can
life
make it
works.
happen.
Like,
Oh,
I have
the
an
kids
idea
are
that-
almost out of the nest. Bill and Sue are ready.
3 to 4 hours notice is about what I've got. So, but I do want to just circle back on a couple things here quickly. One of which is, if you were part of the boutique tasting on Saturday, the email is going out tomorrow. So if you think you missed it, I haven't sent it yet. It's almost done. Too many things on the go. I went skiing today, so sue me. It's been a busy couple of weeks trying to get the shop pulled back together. And then we had this tonight. So, and this was an awesome tasting. I was worried I was going to be too tired and not into it, but from start to finish, everything in this lineup tonight was awesome. So, and I will say, I think the cognacs showed very well in it, and it's a style we don't see enough or give enough attention to of spirit. And there's potential there because there's not a lot of old single malt to be had at affordable prices, but there is a decent amount of old cognac still at sometimes unbelievably good prices for things that are approaching 100 years of age. So, yeah. Anyway, I want to thank Harmony and Kurt for taking part, for backing me up on this one. Thank you to everybody for taking part in the tasting. I hope you enjoyed it. I know there's a few of you that couldn't make it and are watching this later, so thank you for watching it later. I hope you enjoy the range. But as always, everyone, thank you. Have a great night. Stay well. Go Flames. It's game night tonight. I don't know if we're going to make the playoffs or not, but you know, don't say that.
Enjoy the bling though, Andrew. It's very nice.
The bling is pretty nice. Feels heavy.
Flavor Ferg.
Anyway, Flavor Ferg out. Good night, everyone.